Oh, and we'll admit Jay, because we like him here too. Don't tell him that when he arrives. And we'll start sharing. So I'm going to give a brief overview of, we had the Stakeholders Advisory Board meeting at, well, mid-December. And it was right after our last meeting, so it would be a great time to check in on that. We did more formally title it the first birthday party. So that was way more fun-filled than just the advisory board. So to quickly go into this, you've all seen it likely, unless this is your first time here. And if that is, welcome. You've joined a really fun crew who is here to help you. So we are research institutions that support research subject to compliance regulations, and we're working together to grow the knowledge pool and produce efficiencies. And as of around now, we have around 245 institutions from around the world participating. Obviously, our biggest collection of people is from the States. You can read more on regulatedresearch.org. Yes, links to the document. Let's get that in there a few more times. We have a lot of people. So please sign in there, as well as that's going to be where we start doing the Q&A throughout the whole talk. And Eric, can you keep your eye on the waiting room too?
Yep.
Thank you. Our website got tons and tons of resources. This is just a highlight tour. We collect items from various government agencies. We collect things from higher ed. We're attempting to have some source of truth with many of these documents. And this isn't just a place where, hey, this group is looking for money from you, because, well, we try to keep it limited to the government and the higher ed resources. Slack, we have a really active Slack group. We have around 800 members, and we're pretty good with answering your questions when you come there. So that's the normal stuff. You've heard many of those before. Then the stakeholders. When we were writing the proposal, we reached out to about 10 different institutions that were all operating in the space of some form of regulated research. And some of them had biomedical focuses, and some of them had Department of Defense focuses. But realistically, these were all institutions that we looked at as, well, advisors in this space. And they all agreed to provide feedback to RCOP and their activities, a various level of assessment on the value that we were offering, as well as some of the kind of the early vetting. And we would come to them with, here's some ideas we're considering, would this fly? So our very first time we met with this whole crew was mid-December. And let's see. This was the overwhelming feeling that we felt. I mean, they're super proud of what we've been doing as a group. They recognize the results that have been put forward. They're really just, they found it also to be a unique offering that amongst all of these different groups that we get together with, RCOP was one that did span between so many different domains. And well, we're really proud of that, but this wasn't why we just gathered. So yes, we could have spent the whole time saying how amazing things are, but realistically, we wanted to ask them for feedback and advice on how we were doing. Let's see. So generally, as I said, it was what you've been putting out is great. This has been really helpful. We're able to drive people to the website. maybe they didn't catch it at the time, but this is something that they can go back to and collect this type of information later. They wanted how to help make that case of advocating when we're not just advocating to the federal government. We recognize that each of us probably is trying to help advocate at our own institution. And maybe that's bringing on more researchers, or at least getting the support of your researchers, or is that even from the standpoint of your leadership doesn't recognize what a large impact or change that some of this regulated research is putting into your institution. And so that was one thing that if we could figure out ways to promote that story better and provide that back to everyone of how to bring this back to your institution and, well, shed some light on all of that. They're also considering that potentially the leadership would be involved in those funding decisions and how to fund your programs, how to, well, essentially, why are we spending money toward this? Do you need training? What do you need? And this would be something that I think our role could really help in this space. Another one they did say was during 2021, we produced a paper following a regulated research workshop series. And that was a paper written by 11 authors with from 10 different institutions. And this talked about what pillars and what the foundation was of a really solid research program. And I think one of the things that we heard was, that was great, can we have more? And we'll see what we can do in that space. That might involve whether small groups, working groups, how do we bring more of that community perspective to all. And then one that we did spend quite a bit of time on was these workshops, or no, these webinars, they are great and they do provide some level of training that you could offer out to new staff, someone solving a similar problem, but they are, well, they're an hour and this is as much as we can pack into them. I mean, we're already packing solid 60 minutes typically into them. And do we get into the level of details that maybe would be desirable in this area? So we talked a little bit about how we could really work with that and where we could take that. So that came with the thought of, well, we also have workshops budgeted. And this is a direct quote from one of the stakeholders, and it was, if we're doing a workshop, could we have one day with a very specific goal, very narrowly, I can't say that word, clearly scoped, and then with a clear deliverable at the end of the day. And the example that we started coming around and chatting on was, what if we wrote up maybe an outline or did some parts of that on the SSP? And Eric and I both love that ask. We think that that is a great idea of a missing piece within our community that we would like to offer our first workshop as an SSP workshop. And what we're thinking amazing outcomes on that would be is having the ability to learn where you and your interpretation, your institutions stand amongst your peers. And what we started moving away from was, this isn't going to just be, let me read you mine, I'll compare it with yours, because we're working in completely different environments. So one of the things we'll probably tackle in this is, okay, let's first decide on what this enclave looks like and then write it up. But I think this will give an idea of maybe, well, just, are you overly conservative? Are you making assumptions that you probably shouldn't? maybe are you opening up yourself to questions by assessors? And I suspect by talking about it in much more detail, we're going to learn some of these things about, well, what we've considered normal. And that brings me to, we are proposing it, and I'm saying proposing, yes, it's proposed, but it's also a confident proposal. How about that? So we are proposing a full-day workshop to the EDUCAUSE Cybersecurity Privacy's Professional Conference. That's May 1st, and it's going to be in Bellevue, Washington, which I get is not a very centrally located workshop, but I guess I'm hoping that due to timing, let's start figuring this out. And I will also put on the table that I would really like you there. And RCOP was wise enough to set aside quite a bit of participant support funds. And before you look at that, like, hey, it's fine. We can pay for various forms of conferences. Participant support funds from the NSF is a very particular type of funds. And if I do not spend this on your benefits, I give it right back to the NSF. So don't want that. I was going to at least breathe on this slide for a little bit, and I wanted to show places on the sign-in sheet where, if this is something that you have considered possibly speaking at, I can give reasons why this is a phenomenal conference all day long. It's small enough, you see the same people. They have definitely shifted from, we only do traditional security, to research security is a really big interest of theirs these days. And this is one of the first conferences I found that really recognizes that this is a great new space. And I suppose what I'm looking for that would help make this proposal even stronger is if I could say, I pitched this to the community of practice, and we already had 15 different institutions that said, yes, that sounds really cool, or I would like to participate, something like that. I'd be really excited on that. So I'm also offering up, if you have ideas on controls, if you have ideas on another talk that maybe you're just looking for a partner on, let me see how I can help on that. I will put I could put the chat thing in a second. That brings me to, at least let me share what's going on around us too. So as I said, the call for proposals, it's up until the 23rd. I have no insider knowledge on whether that's a real 23rd or a possibly extended date. So at the moment I go with 23rd. On January 18th, there's a CMMC, implementing CMMC conference. Oh, Louis, you've got a question.
Well, actually a comment and offer too. So I typically have reviewed the security proposals for the general EDUCAUSE conference, so I'm familiar with the criteria and the kinds of things they're looking for. So I'm happy to advise on proposals or review them, give suggestions. I mean, I myself, I'm going to try to submit one, especially on the PSSP or SSPs, but I am offering myself as a resource for those who maybe would like somebody. Won't be looking at this particular conference for submissions because I typically try to submit. So I'm happy to provide comments and guidance on what I have looked at as a reviewer.
Thank you. And you've been to this one before, right?
Yeah, I've been to this one, gave a proposal when I was with the central IT office, and also have attended it and not just proposed at it. I was a co-presenter at it. I'm sorry, it wasn't my proposal.
So last year I submitted 3 different talks, and much to my surprise / horror, all 3 were accepted for the exact same day. It made for a really adventurous day. How about that? But yeah, I've had great success with submitting in the past, and it seems like it's definitely a conference where people are definitely looking to how to engage in the research, the regulated research, and what does research security look like from a security tone. Let's see, we also have there's a CIC implementing CMMC conference coming up. It's in San Diego. We will have a little bit of representation there, but I don't believe that's a big one we're able to attend. Next month, we, as Anurag was saying, this is the first real assessor you've gotten to speak to of Amy Sardinsky-Cottons from REN-ISAC. So she will be our speaker next month, and I'm super excited on that one. And then I suppose I'll turn it over to Erik, unless we have items from, let me scroll down, see if there was, okay. Oh, I appreciate this. I appreciate that controls are being filled in of, we've had some either discussions, I'm looking for all sorts of ones that you've potentially tripped over at your own institution, and wouldn't this be great to have more conversations about them? Okay, and I see that there is, I will promote it again since I promoted it at the beginning, but there is an area of, if there's items you'd like to promote to make sure everyone in the community has heard about, whether it's a job opening or here's some news, I've got that space in there too. So with that, Erik, I will stop sharing and allow you to.
Okay, I will share. First, put it in presenter mode.
You brought in the crowd, Erik.
No, I know. Everybody seems to be very excited about what I'm going to say. Okay. As long as I get to. Oh, you gotta allow me to share though.
Oh yes, sorry. I was all easy breezy. I'm like, oh, I don't have to prep this for the various presenters. Sorry.
Nope.
All right, you are co-host now.
All right, sounds good.
I suppose, did I miss anything that you heard from the stakeholders?
No, I think you covered it pretty good. Now I gotta. All right. So I'll be telling you a little bit. Actually, there are two things that I'll be talking about. One is a very brief status on CMMC because people keep asking it. So what's the latest that we've heard so far? And then I'll be talking about this preparing a NIST publication focused on HPC by a NIST-led work group. And I want to point out two little events. The first one is the Supercomputing 22 in the past, where we, for the first time, this group from NIST presented, I presented it at the special interest user group. And then on Friday, other people from that working group presented it as a panel. And then what I want to alert this community to is that there's going to be an in-person workshop in Gaithersburg, Maryland, not at the NIST facilities itself, but the one next door, because they're renovating their cafeteria, so they cannot have a conference, but they can have one next door at an institute, and it'll be Wednesday through Thursday, March 15 through 16. So mark your calendars if you're interested. And it's actually just half an hour ago, I got a link to the website, which is not on my slide yet, but I will share that with this community. And that website is then where you can register for the workshop if you're interested in. So the first thing that I would like to alert everybody to, if you're interested in CMMC, we're now having these big complicated debates and everybody's asking, but Jacob Horn has given a wonderful talk on the history of CMMC starting all the way back somewhere 2004. So this is definitely a link that is worth your while. It's about an hour talk, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, but it's worth every minute if you have to deal with compliance and CMMC and NIST and CUI and all that kind of stuff. So the things that are happening just from a terminology point of view, originally CMMC was version 1 and it had 5 different levels. And then in 2021, they decided to change it, and there's now CMMC version 2, which simplified it to level 1, level 2, and level 3. And it's level 1 is essentially what's already in the Federal Acquisition Rules supplement as normal safeguarding. It's a very small set of controls, maybe 18 of them, that everybody should very easily be able to cover. And most institutions that respect themselves and have spent a little bit of time will have that in place, and it should be no problem. Level 2 is what is currently the law of the land in the Defense Federal Acquisition Rules supplement. That means you need to be compliant with 171. Now for CMMC 2.0, they will actually require 171 revision 3. And revision 3 has been out for review in the fall, and it's expected to become officially released sometime now, or may already have been. And then level 3 is not expected to be a requirement for the majority of contracts that academic communities are interested in. And that is when, in addition to 171, you are prepared to handle advanced persistent threats. So they're typically not static controls or procedures or policies. They basically require 172, requires that you stand up a security operations center and that you monitor the activities that you see of all kinds of internet actors trying to get in, or other ways to gain access to your system. You detect patterns and then do preventive action with honeypots and all kinds of activities. So it's a sort of a next level of maturity. It's definitely significant, also much more expensive to operate because you have to have 24/7 staff somewhere. So what is happening now? One of the good things that happened in 21 and 22 is, with all the cybersecurity attacks, the awareness across the world with cybersecurity has been raised. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, LastPass was making an announcement that they got hacked, and everybody who saved their passwords in LastPass should consider their passwords are stolen. They sort of say, well, they were encrypted and they don't know how to encrypt them, but they got stolen. And so now they can, with brute force, crack some of the encryptions if that is possible. So everybody is aware, and that is a good thing. But from a procedural point of view, we actually have not made any change. There's no new DFARS out that says you have to be CMMC compliant, or CMMC basically says you have to be 171 compliant. And that's what you still need to do. So if you are an organization, don't think about, oh, I'm going to be prepared for CMMC. The best way to be prepared for CMMC is to be compliant with what the Department of Defense asked us to do in December of 2017, which is to implement NIST 171. If you have that done, then CMMC is going to be relatively easy, although the auditors may be more picky than when you do your typical self-assessment. So that's where we get to the next thing. How do you prove compliance? And that's where we sort of have a big difference. What you need to do is clear. How somebody is going to tell you that you're doing that correctly is a little bit more complicated. And so that is the big problem. You have to have somebody check, and you have to be careful to not be a true self-checker. Like if I'm the director for research computing and my staff is operating a system that I'm telling my vice president for research and my chief information officer, this system is compliant, and I'm the only one who looked at the controls, and I'm the only one who, or my staff, who interpreted it, well, then there's probably going to be some gaps. You need to have somebody else who has no stake in getting a positive answer look at it. And so within the university, often the Office of Internal Audit is a very good partner to ask them, because they actually, in most universities, in most states, they are legally considered independent. They have a reporting structure that allows them to do an audit of all kinds of functions of the university, including this one, and they're professionals, and they will ask the same questions that any auditor will do. It may not be the best, but it's a good point to start. So that's where you have to be careful that self means not really the person who is providing the service. It has to be somebody else. And one of the things that we've done at the University of Florida is work with the Office of Internal Audit. And we also contracted with an external auditor company that has worked with academic institutions, has a little bit more of a feeling for what a research environment looks like, as opposed to a typical enterprise database institution. And we got lots of good feedback. But in general, we had done our homework pretty well. There were no major things that we failed on massively. The majority was documentation. You did not specify, we didn't specify things clearly enough. And so that was all very easy to fix, actually. And the typical assessment process requires time. And that's also important. If you want an external auditor to be successful, you're paying them money for their time. And sometimes it's a fixed contract. Sometimes it's a time contract, hours contract. That depends on how you negotiate it. But you have to be prepared that you, your staff, and several other offices at the university who are involved in auditing the controls, that they are ready to respond when the external auditor asks for some evidence, asks for a meeting. So it requires some organization. And the way we've done it is to create an initial workshop. Then you have a good point of contact in both organizations, the assessor organization and the university that's being assessed for its work, so that communication flows quickly. And then we have some weekly meetings where we just make sure that nobody is waiting for everybody else. I have heard horror stories of people who paid good money to a company, and then after a year, they gave up because they couldn't make progress. They couldn't finish the list of controls. And then they had to hire another company who basically enforced some of these best practices in the process, and then got it done in a couple of months. So it's very important to really do your part. So how can a community help? And this is actually where I feel there are some, like I said, horror stories. If these people had been part of our community and they would have said, hey, we're planning for some assessment, what do we do? There are plenty of people in our community who have gone through an assessment and would be willing. I have talked to many people who reached out to me and say, hey, we were thinking of an assessment, how does it work? And I'm happy to sort of just talk to them and set them through the process, get them started, and it helps. So that's where I think the community can help. And we can even at some point write together with a small team as a working group, a document that we can publish. It's like, how do you set up an assessment? And they don't all have to be exactly the same. There's a couple of options that you can pick from, but the core activities and deliverables and goals are exactly the same. And so we can definitely give some good advice that I think would be very valuable as a deliverable from this community. So now I want to tell you about the main thing that we're very excited about is NIST. In 2018, immediately after the Department of Defense had that deadline of you have to be compliant with 171, everybody in the community was concerned was, how are we going to do this for HPC systems? It's one thing for desktops and individual database servers, because lots of people have done that before for medical information, and then we just have to do some more controls with 171 than typically are required for HIPAA. But what do we do for HPC? And so people within NIST reached out to several individuals at universities and at national labs and DOE labs, Department of Defense labs and DOE labs. And we had 2 workshops in the course of basically 2 years. But then somehow it fizzled and we didn't get to the goal. Now in 22, Dr. Yang Guo at NIST started this back up. And in the beginning of 22, he invited a sequence of speakers, to talk to a group about what are they doing. And so basically we got reports from Lincoln Labs at MIT and Los Alamos National Lab and Lawrence Livermore Lab and Oak Ridge and Department of Defense modernization program. And from that, somewhere in the middle of the year, we then created a subgroup of that committee, of that team, to actually start writing a document. And so we met every other week, and we worked on a Google Doc, and basically we drafted some outline from all these talks that we had heard. What are sort of the things that are common and the problems that HPC systems face whenever they try to meet the controls, and what are different institutions, what have they done, and what have they been able to negotiate with their auditors to get it passed and certified. So now in the beginning of January, just last week, we had our meeting where we sort of put the last draft words in the text. Now we need to do some editing and streamlining, and then that document will be shared with the community and basically will be the topic of discussion for feedback at this March workshop. So we're well on track to meet that timeline. So we now, that's what I just said. So the actual goal of this document is to create what is in technical language called an overlay. So NIST 853 is the big catalog for all security controls. It has a total of around 1,000 controls. And you can pick from these controls to sort of craft your risk management for managing your system. And then NIST has defined 3 baselines. There is the low, moderate, and high. And the moderate baseline is the one that is considered good security practice for restricted data. Low is like what everybody at least should do. It's like, well, you know, when you have, that's the minimum you have to do. Low is something that most institutions will do. And it's a little bit more than level 1 in CMMC, but not much. That's just basic hygiene for doing security. Moderate is the moderate base level, is what is sort of considered good stuff to deal with PHI, like it's stronger than HIPAA. It is required for most FISMA. When people talk about you need to be FISMA compliant, what they mean is 53 moderate compliant. And then high is when you want to get to some more specific security requirements and things that are more sensitive. And then you have, when you're dealing with secret and top secret material in the Department of Defense, then there are some more controls, but they are at the level of high or a little bit higher beyond that. But they again use the language of 853 to talk about the controls. And what happened with NIST 800-171, it was created by NIST to deal with controlled, unclassified information. And the NIST document 853 also tells you how you should use this. So you can use it as a catalog, and you can start from these low, moderate, high baselines. And if that meets the need of your institution, that's fine. But that's not the end of it. What you can do is you can say, well, some of these controls make no sense for my organization, or they're not what I want to do, or they're not easily implementable, or they're expensive, or they're time consuming. So then you can make changes. And then there's a process. There are actually two big processes. One is a tailoring of one of the things. Somebody sets up a baseline, and then you tweak it a little bit, and that's called tailoring. And then another one is to create an overlay, which means you take the moderate baseline, and then you sort of make some changes by saying these controls are particularly important, but we cannot implement them as documented. So we come up with some compensating controls, and this is how we're doing it, and this is the rationale, and this is how we do it. So there are several overlays that are maintained by NIST, and they have another document number, NIST 800, whatever. So that is the process that we're trying to do for HPC. There are some controls, for instance, what everybody and every auditor in security expects that you do is you do antivirus. So you scan your file system on a daily basis or every other day. Well, if you have a high performance computing system that has a parallel file system that has multiple petabytes, you're not going to just scan your file system with billions of files on a daily basis. And even if you would do it, then it would be a massive performance impact, and you would jeopardize the mission of your HPC system. So clearly, that's not the right way to do it. Now, we all understand there is some concern about malware, and so you have to do something to compensate for that. And that is what we discuss in this document, and we provide a context to make that, to provide that guidance in the document that we now have a draft for. And then the goal is that with that draft, we will then create an overlay, and the overlay will then guide people to implement things slightly differently. And the value of this, of course, is anybody can just write an overlay. But if I just write my overlay myself and I tell my auditors, hey, this is the overlay that I came up with, then the auditors are going to say, well, who are you? That doesn't mean very much. But if that overlay is created with consensus by a bunch of people that are experts in the field and is endorsed by the community, well, now we can sort of expect that, yes, this is what is reasonable. And that is actually the status of currently NIST 853 moderate. It was done by a bunch of people, and we've now all used it for years, and everybody knows, every auditor respects that, yep, that is the standard. Everybody does that, and that is reasonably good. And so we want to create something that is endorsed by the community, and that will then be recognized, and that we can argue with an auditor, oh, this is not just me, Erik, saying that this is a good way to do it. There's a whole community behind it, and we've tested it, and it's vetted, and that gives it value of impact. So the way we have to learn how to talk about an HPC system is the way this document begins. So we introduce zones, and there are 4 zones. And the first one is the access zone. That is the thing that's connected to the outside. And that is where everybody who wants to come to the system has to come in. That's where login nodes are. That's where data transfer nodes are. That's also where any system administrator needs to log in with their regular credentials. And then from there, they go to an inside thing to do their system administration activities. And then there is the high performance computing zone. That's the bunch of all the compute nodes. They're all identical. They all do the same thing. They are optimized to work really hard and fast, but nobody can get to them from the outside directly. You have to do it indirectly. And then there is the data storage zone. That's where all our parallel file systems are. They all have their own special things. Typically, regular users don't log into any of the nodes that are supporting the infrastructure, but the file system is made available to the login nodes, and it is available to all the computing nodes, and the users can get to it through the proper protocols of being a mounted POSIX file system or WAS file system or a S3 type or whatever. And then there is the one that needs to be protected the most in some ways. That's the management zone. So that is where you have a bunch of infrastructure nodes that provide the background to operate the system. So you have the DNS and the NTP server, the DHCP servers, all those things, the scheduler, the storage of the software, configuration management nodes like Puppet and Foreman or Ansible, any other things. So this is where system administrators do the majority of their work. And when you make a change there, it sort of impacts possibly any of these other zones. And the reason we came to these zones is that the security posture is very different. So the access zone, we're going to have lots of people there because every regular user is allowed there, but the management zone is not. So if at some point we see some activity that is not a typical activity associated with system administration, then that immediately can raise an alert. So that's how you can tune and manage an HPC system. So that's the sort of the context and the language we use. And this is a diagram that shows what I was just telling you. You have the access zone with the login nodes. We have a data transfer node. There possibly are some web portals that you can make some of the research data available. There's the green pathway. That's your fast network that connects everything to everything else. The purple network is the high performance storage, like typically InfiniBand or Omniverse or Slingshot, that connects the HPC nodes, the compute nodes with themselves, and also provides fast access to the storage. And then the storage nodes are the controllers for the storage, and then you have the disk drives that could be of various kinds. And then you have the management zone that has all its special nodes, and a very limited number of people have access to it, namely the system administrators. So the draft discusses these HPC concepts, taking into account that performance is really the key. Software, we discuss, well, how do we manage software? Because you cannot do your typical whitelisting and blacklisting. And we also have to allow development. Typically, systems that you see in the world of restricted data, like a hospital system for healthcare that is managed and needs to be kept secure. Well, they don't do any development. They have a database that has all the patient information, and nobody is dealing with any software. If you're going to develop new software, then there's a very rigorous development cycle on some completely separate system. Somebody develops the software, then you test it, and then you sort of do it in a test environment, and then you move it to production. Now, for the research, where everybody is writing their own code, you cannot go through this cycle. That would just kill the productivity. So you have to deal with that differently. Then one of the modern developments in the last decade is containers. Containers are great to manage systems and deal with complex software stacks. But at the same time, from a system administrator point of view and from a security point of view, they are kind of like a sort of a black box. You get this complex thing. So how do you manage that one? And then part of HPC is also that often HPC systems want to be at the bleeding edge of new technology. If NVIDIA comes up with a new GPU, we want to be able to make that available, at least at some part of the HPC system, so that our researchers can use that latest technology and be the first to do whatever new discovery. And then we also discuss risk assessment. What are the threats to the various zones? They're different. And what are the security posture you establish to get there? And then what are the remaining challenges? Some of these challenges are, what is the root of trust? Like, how do you make sure that the right thing is allowed to get to another one? So that is bringing in this principle of zero trust that's now advocated by the 2021 executive memo of the president is like, you have to design security systems with security in mind, and you have to go towards the principle of zero trust. So then another challenge is that when you look at standard enterprise things, there are lots of sophisticated tools to manage systems and to do like virus checking, and there are all these tools that are deployed. There are multiple vendors available. For HPC, some of these tools work, many of them don't do the right thing or cause such a heavy overhead that it doesn't work. So the majority of operators of HPC centers and HPC systems customize their own set of tools, and they assemble it from open source. And so that is a challenge, that there is a diversity, and it would be good if we could spend some time as a community and develop some of these tools that everybody can use and easily deploy and that are properly documented. And maybe at some point there will be a vendor to support it, but even if only the community would support it, that would be an advantage. So right now that's a little bit of a challenge. Different things are different. And again, when you're talking to auditors, standards are your friend. If you can say this is the standard in the community, then the auditors know that that's fine. If you do something customized, you have to really explain why that is good. And then the conversation is a little bit different every time. And then there are some controls that are currently in the moderate baseline, if that's where you start from, that are not applicable. So with our overlay, we want to point that out and remove them and replace them with other things if they're necessary, or if they're totally not applicable, then you just throw them out, and that's makes the conversation with the auditors easy because it's not applicable and everybody agrees that it's not applicable. And then there is another thing about supply chain. The supply chain, of course, touches everybody, but in HPC, since we want to be early adopters, supply chain is more important. And as I already pointed out, we want to follow the evolution and the diversity of hardware much more quickly than in enterprise computing in an HPC system. And then there is the big challenge is that most of the time when you put any security thing in place, no matter how good it is, it's always going to have performance impact. So that's it. Questions?
We do have a few. We'll start with the SOC requirement is also a 24/7 staffed requirement, is it not?
Say that again?
That the SOC requirement for staffing 24/7?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. And then how large is your staff to handle all of these requirements?
How large is my staff? I have a total team of 23 people to manage all of the research computing system, and half of them about are system facing and the rest are customer facing, and all of them have to contribute to the security. They all get security awareness training, but there are probably 3 or 4 that spend most of their time with dealing with these controls in more detail. But I don't have anybody who is just 100% working on compliance.
There was a lot of chatter in the chat on the kind of how novel or interesting the zones topic was. That there weren't questions that appeared from that, but it was also, we could use that terminology in the enclave settings too. But then there was one zone question of, are you recommending separate infrastructure zone for HPC from the rest of the institution? And that means a separate AD, DNS, etc.
Yes, so we definitely think of the HPC system as a system of its own that has a management zone for its own, that would be fully in scope for the system and the review. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you could not leverage some systems from the outside. Like in the diagram that I showed you, there was the blue network on the outside. That was the outside network that is subject to some security controls. But again, we don't trust any of it. So that's managed by another person. And when you have your HPC system assessed for CMMC or NIST 800-171 or anything else, then that would not be part of it. And that also doesn't mean that you could not leverage some of the Active Directory functions or some of the DNS functions. For instance, you can have a DNS server inside the management zone for anything that's inside the HPC system. And then you implement DNSSEC to get to a DNSSEC server that is the campus managed, and the DNSSEC server then talks to all kinds of other regional and national DNSSEC servers to get it. So you don't necessarily have to have everything inside the management zone that provides a service to you. That decision of where the boundary lies is going to be part of the scoping rules, and that is something that needs to be designed and discussed and sometimes negotiated with your auditors.
I see, Jay, your hand is up.
Yeah, Eric, I was just going to ask, do you have account management and event logging as standalone components that you have in that management zone? Or beyond that, do you have kind of a document for your environment of the components that reside in that particular zone that you could share with the group at some point?
Well, I do have that. So the notion of the zone was developed by this committee, by looking at what many of the presenters from national labs and other things showed us. And it turns out that once we drew up that diagram, it was very easy for me to match what we had developed into it. You know, it fit very nicely. And to answer your specific question, yes, we do have event logging that's inside, and we do have account management inside. But we do leverage the campus Active Directory because our campus policy is that you cannot manage people's passwords in your own system. There's only one password for one authentication. So basically, people have to authenticate, and that gets delegated to the Active Directory, which is out of scope. And then we authorize with our own account system inside, and that's in scope. And so the fact that somebody has authenticated with the University of Florida Active Directory, essentially, doesn't give them any rights to do anything inside of HPC systems.
So you do your authentication outside and then come back in with authorization to be there.
Yes. That's how we cut that cat.
Here's an interesting one. How do you rationalize and measure HPC performance degradation if you have to make a measured decision about what not to do? So for example, we won't install the software because of performance.
Yes, so we've made several decisions like that, and we actually had a conversation with the High Trust Alliance. As this group knows, I'm also subjecting my HPC system through to an external assessor to get high trust certification, which is sort of independent but highly overlapping with CMMC. And we actually negotiated with the High Trust Alliance to make sure that whatever the assessor and the University of Florida agreed would meet the quality control of the High Trust Alliance, and they would approve it. And we talked about things like encrypting file systems and doing audio antivirus. And the main argument was performance. And we managed to come up with a set of acceptable compensating controls. So it's not trivial, but it's all doable.
Thank you.
And it is the expectation of this community that I will tell you how the story ends when the assessment is done, which is right now we're in the final stages of implementing everything that they recommended, which we hope to finish this month. And then we start a 90-day freezing period to operate essentially in a compliant way, and then will be certified by HITRUST in May.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm looking to part 2 of that story as well as part 2 of this story of.
Yes, yes. So this story is more general because it'll have the weight of NIST and a national community of experts on security and high performance computing.
Indeed. I suppose the last question I'll go with and then go with, do you have a recommended template for documenting risk assessment of the system?
Actually, I do, and I got it from somewhere on the web, and I can share that at some point, yes.
Okay, and if we didn't reach your question, we'll fill it in before it goes online, but I suppose on that, thank you so much.
Thank
Any
you,
other-
everybody.
I'll stop.